It is on. And hello, Dodger fans. What a roller coaster of emotions. Your boys Alonso and Juan are here with you to kind of break everything down. The pain, the despair, the head hanging to where we are right now. The holy shiitake. Like there's no other way to put it. That was just it was a lot. And there's a lot to unpack tonight too. But overall, Juan, how are you feeling going into tomorrow?
I'm still scared. I mean, the thing is the Dodgers had to throw everything in the kitchen sink just to get through this game. But what a difference it makes when your offense shows up, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that make me nervous right now. I gotta tell all Dodger fans right now, just enjoy this. Enjoy tonight's win. It's so much better when the Dodgers win. Enjoy it. And then around 1:20 tomorrow, you can start letting that anxiety build and the fear of what's going to happen, because they need Buehler to come up huge, because they almost used everybody tonight out of the bullpen. And so who knows what they're going to have to do tomorrow, because tomorrow is, again, everybody's on call tomorrow.
And before we break everything down, mad props to Kenley Jansen. Kenley Jansen, who has had everyone nervous and then some. Dave Roberts has to be smiling tonight somewhere, just like, oh, he's back. Because the thing is like the velocity wasn't necessarily where the Dodgers I know want it, but what was key with Kenley tonight is the spin. And that ball, if you're in the batter's box, it looks like it's 95, 97, 96, whatever, right? It doesn't look 92 or 91. And a part of it is the spin, and it was there. So all the props in the world to that. And I know you were nervous about that too going into this game as to when Jansen would pitch. And
I mean, I texted you, but I mean, I'm not going to go as far as to say that he's back, but I will just say this. He was facing the bottom part of the Braves lineup, right? I would have felt very different if he was in there facing Acuna and Freddie Freeman and Ozuna. But go ahead, proceed.
Well, and for me, what was key for him is it's almost like, so right now it's essentially like he's having rehab starts, right? The caveat is it's in the postseason. And to counter the issue with that as to why that's important, Dustin May did not trust this stuff tonight. He wasn't feeling it. He definitely didn't trust it. And you know what? A few weeks back, I remember Charlie Steiner had asked Dave Roberts, hey, how do you feel about Dustin? How confident do you think Dustin is in his stuff? And Dave Roberts said he was unsure as to how Dustin felt about his stuff. So going into tonight, you could definitely tell that Dustin wasn't feeling his stuff, wasn't trusting his stuff. He was getting into these situations where he was getting full counts and obviously making unproductive pitches, as you would say.
Right.
And all things considered with Dustin, he kept them in the game. So, I mean, I'm still going to look at it as a quality start, because that definitely could have been a lot worse. It definitely could have been a lot worse. But, all things considered, with Dustin going out and going 2 innings, giving up 3 hits, on 2 runs. Only 1 was earned, 2 walks, and 3 strikeouts. All things considered, especially with this potent Braves lineup, we'll take it. It wasn't as long as a start as they would have liked, I'm sure, from Dustin, because obviously they had to go to Joe Kelly, right away. But and we'll get to Joe Kelly here in a second. But I mean, all things considered, when you kind of look at Kenley Jansen going into tonight, I think this was kind of that rehab start, if you will, before he goes back to the majors and gets it going again. But I mean, from what you saw, and again, it just for transparency's sake, it was the bottom half of the lineup. It wasn't the top half, which is the murderer's row. But all things considered, how do you feel about Kenley going into tomorrow, especially with his short outing?
Look, he looked better than he did from Game 3. He had a much cleaner inning than he did in Game 3. So it's baby steps. He's building up because we are going to need him. We're going to need him in these next 2 games because at this point, they're throwing. You don't know what you're going to get from your starters, and that's the unfortunate thing. I mean, look, I still want to stress, as I said, I want to enjoy tonight's victory before I start freaking out about tomorrow. But right now, it's still an uphill battle because the Braves have their pitching staff lined up. The good thing, though, it was, that the Dodgers won and we get to play again tomorrow. In regards to Kenley, I mean, I think he needed that for his psyche. Yes, it was the bottom part of the lineup, but he struck out the side. I can't remember the last time that Kenley struck out the side. So maybe his stuff wasn't as sharp, but like I said, it was better than Game 3. So hopefully that means that he's progressing nicely and he'll be even better the next game, whether it's Game 6 or Game 7 that he pitches.
And for those of you joining us on Periscope or YouTube, again, thank you for joining us. The Dodgers win tonight 7-3. They stay alive going into Game 6 tomorrow, where it'll be Walker Buehler versus Max Fried. The Dodgers will be the home team. Literally, all that means is they're just wearing their whites and they're doing the traditional visitor home team as far as the hitting goes. But it's potentially this is obviously what the Dodgers had kind of leveraged as far as what they were banking on was their depth. And tonight was kind of an indicator of that by, like you said, throwing everything in the kitchen sink. They didn't necessarily fully empty the bullpen. They obviously made it clear that Gonsolin, Buehler, and Kershaw were not available tonight. But for the most part, it sounded like everyone else was available. And as it lines up, Walker Buehler starting tomorrow. It sounds like Tony Gonsolin would go on Sunday if they force a Game 7. So there, in lies kind of the secret weapon, which would be not so secret Julio Urias, that at some point they would use him in relief. But another kind of low-key thing that we saw tonight that was nice to see was that Pedro Baez had an outstanding outing.
Yeah.
That changeup was on. And that's the Baez that we all know he can be and where he can make himself a valuable weapon going into this. And Victor Gonzalez came up huge too. He had those 2 guys on, but he was able to grind through it. And that was huge for him. Brusdar Graterol had an outstanding outing as well. And for me, what's important about those things, even though they threw the kitchen sink at them, they weren't very long outings aside from Joe Kelly and Blake Treinen.
Yeah.
Aside from those 2 dudes having to go out and do what they did, that for me is key going into these next 2 games where they're not gassing out their guys. Obviously we know Max Fried is going tomorrow, and then it looks like, and they've indicated that Ian Anderson is who would go on Sunday if they force a Game 7. So, as that lines up, as we kind of go into tomorrow, it's going to be interesting to see if Walker, like you said, can show up and do the thing. But we'll talk about tomorrow in a second. As far as tonight goes, Mookie Betts, when he made that catch, that is where the momentum shifted. And in this game, if anything, what we know is it's a microcosm of momentum swings here and there. Because like you have said time and time again, it's a little bit of luck and a lot of execution, right? So it's a matter of making those 2 things kind of come together. When Mookie did what he did, and obviously at the time, a lot of people were like, you know what, that's just a heads-up play. But at the same time, I don't know of a lot of right fielders that make that play. Most guys would have to dive to make that play, and they don't make that throw. So all credit in the world for an outstanding play to Mookie, for who that might be the as we look back on this, that could be the series changing play going into tomorrow and potentially Sunday. For you, when you kind of look at everything, for you, what was the big momentum shift, if you will, in tonight's game that kind of got everything going?
Well, I mean, that was huge. I mean, that was huge. And thank you. I mean, first of all, welcome back to the series, Mookie. This is the guy. This is the MVP. This is the guy that we're paying all this money for. He showed up, and what was so great is it wasn't just his bat. It was his glove. It's you see all those all the intangibles that Mookie brings. He brought him today, so it was a welcome sight to have Mookie back in the series. A big thank you, I think, has to go to Marcell Ozuna on that play. Because if Ozuna doesn't do that little jump step of his, that's who knows what that inning ends up being. So I definitely, obviously, I think that was a momentum shift. And I think that was because I think everyone on the Dodgers at that point recognized they just caught a break. And for the first time, I think, in the series, they took advantage of a break that they got. And that's what they're going to need to do in order to win this series. Is, the Braves have not made many unforced errors in this series. Now the Braves made one, so the Dodgers need to take advantage of that stuff. So that was definitely huge. I also think Blake Trinan, after that inning, holding down the fort, pitching 2 innings, and keeping that game close, I think you can't lose sight of the fact that those veterans that we talked about in the bullpen that we said needed to step up, you mentioned Baez, the veteran bullpen guys stepped up. And, hey, I can't say enough about our young guys. Our young guys so far, they've been carrying us. So it's nice to see that the veterans now showed up. Now the question is, can they do it again tomorrow?
Well, in tonight's game, obviously the youngsters, if you will, I don't really call Seager a veteran yet, just because he hasn't been up here for a hell of a long time. Corey Seager is the best shortstop in baseball. Don't at me like that. That dude is the best shortstop in baseball, and for him to be white hot going into tonight, and obviously last night was last night, but going into tonight, and there've been talk about how motivated these guys were, and everyone kind of was hanging their head down a little bit, if you will. But Corey stepping up, getting that home run, kind of getting the bats going, if you will, going out and kind of doing those intangible things, with 2 for 4 with 2 home runs and 3 RBIs, huge, obviously huge, and doing his part in getting it going, because at the time it was a close game. But then, going with the youth movement, El Príncipe, the Prince,
yeah.
Freshness himself, Will Smith, coming up huge with that bomb. And you know what? The reason that I think that Will doesn't get the props that he deserves, if you will, aside from the fact that he's so young, that at bat was 0-2.
Yeah.
And he came back and he grinded it out, and he was patient. And I think that is what was, for me, the biggest momentum shift aside from the Mookie side, because he basically put on a clinic on how you should go out and grind out an at bat.
Yeah.
He was patient. It's the whole mantra of have a good eye, and he sat there and he just sat back. And let's not forget too, that ball that he hit out, he had to go down to get it. So it wasn't that they made a mistake. Technically, if you think about it, he's swinging at a bad pitch. But all in all, Will kind of reminded these guys, these murderers row of offensive prowess that we have on that Dodgers bench and starting lineup. This is what we have to do. And Dave Roberts, before today's game, was emphasizing that they felt like these guys were not sticking to the plan. And the plan was they need to be patient. They need to make those pitchers work. They need to, grind out those at-bats. And going out and doing that roughneck thing of grinding out those at-bats was huge in that Will Smith at-bat, because if Willie doesn't do that, I don't know if we're sitting here talking about a Dodger victory, if I'm honest with you. The defense was there tonight, but without Will doing that, that still leaves the opportunity for the Braves to still pounce. And, we might be talking, series over, right? So, Will Smith coming up huge, and even Kike, going out there and doing those little intangibles as far as the defense went. I'm sorry, not the defense, hitting it through the gapper and just kind of, reminding and showing these guys, they're going to hit it on our shift. That's fine. Freddie Freeman did that on that play where Chris Taylor hurt his ankle. They're going to do that stuff. But the Dodgers also were kind of reminding themselves, hey, we can do that too. Because like they've talked themselves, they're doing and they're built almost a similar way like the Dodgers are, and they know that that's what they should be doing. And now we're here where the momentum is shifting, I think, in a way that is different from the last couple of nights. And I think it's definitely going to benefit the Dodgers going into tomorrow.
Look, to me, the most impressive thing about that Will Smith at bat, and you hinted at this, was the mental aspect of that. Okay, he's been struggling in the series. Not only has he been struggling in the series, and it was an 0-2 count, they kept busting him inside throughout the whole series. They've been actually busting him inside. But early in the game, he made that error on that pass ball that led to the Braves scoring a run. It could have been very easy for him, especially being as young as he is, to put his head down, and then you lose him for the rest of the game. So for him to just sit there and focus and battle off, I mean, some of those pitches, I will say this. The umpire called a strike on an inside fastball, and then the next pitch was not that far from this location, and he called it a ball. So I mean, it could have gone either way in that at bat. But I was just most impressed about how just mentally tough he was, and I hope he keeps that in there, and I hope that leads to more success in the series for him. But that big ups to Will Smith on that home run.
Well, and the other advantage going into tomorrow is Will Smith is going to be in that lineup.
Yeah.
And they're going to ride that hot hand. He's going to go out and do what he's been doing. And I mean, Will Smith is showing why in trade talks, when they've asked for the availability of Will Smith, why the Dodgers have held on to him. He brings those intangibles, as like you said, he has that slight veteran mindset that's been kind of said, where he doesn't get caught up, if you say, in the moment, if you will. Because that pass ball was a very catchable ball, very catchable. It's just one of those, you have a mental lapse because of everything going on. But at the end of the day, they were able to contain, what they were able to and limit the damage control, if you will, even with that mistake. And I mean, look what ended up happening in the process. So, I mean, all the credit in the world to Will going out and doing what he did. Mookie, again, waking up, at the top of that lineup with going 2 for 4 and with 1 RBI. I mean, that even though it doesn't seem like it's anything crazy on the stat sheet, that's the sort of stuff that you want to see going into, hey, every single game is an elimination game now. So we need to have that mentality of what we need, go out and need to do. And even with Muncy getting that walk, he grinded it out and was able to get that walk and get it going. And it was good to see that these guys kind of were like, okay, I'm too good to be, kind of in this slump, if you will, especially right now, because if they don't go out and do that tonight, they go home tomorrow. So, all the credit in the world to them. And on the flip side, on the other side of the ball here, with the Braves, it's been interesting to see the Braves countering what the Dodgers are essentially trying to do, right, without waking up that sleeping dragon. And Minter going out and throwing 3 innings, which is the most that he's thrown in his career.
Yeah.
And getting 7 strikeouts. So, I mean, 7 strikeouts and just essentially dominating those guys. And, 1 hit is all he gave up. And even that situation, the Dodgers were obviously hanging their heads. I mean, you could see it on TV.
Yeah.
But they were able to hey, something clicked, and they remembered that we're better than this. And they were able to go out and face the rest of that bullpen that they threw at them. And all the credit in the world to the Dodgers for countering that, because again, this game has so many momentum shifts in general, but especially in a game like tonight, because it's an elimination game. They go home tomorrow if they do not win tonight. And all the credit in the world to the Dodgers for flipping that switch. And I truthfully think, based on this game, because I think this is probably the best. I'm going to say it this way: the best 7 innings that the Dodgers have played this series. And the reason that I say that is they were able to go out and grind out those at-bats, when they got those bases loaded. They were patient. They were sticking to the plan, as Dave Roberts said. And that's the game that they need to stick to for these remaining 2 games if they want to make it to the World Series in advance. And I hope that Walker can step up to the moment and shine in the moment. He definitely has the stuff. We all know that, and everyone knows and expects him to be a big game pitcher, if you will. So I'm kind of curious to hear your take on how you think Walker will step up into that tomorrow.
Look, I'm nervous. I really am, because we haven't seen the Walker Buehler in the past this whole season. He has been inconsistent this whole season. I mean, he labored in his first start, but hey, he only gave up one run. If he labors tomorrow and only gives up one run, I'll take that, But I am nervous in this sense. We're now seeing starting pitchers for a second time. The bullpens, we're now starting to see them. So the way the Dodgers now have been getting to Will Smith, they forced Shane Green out of the game. They're becoming familiar. Now we're reaching the point in the series where these hitters now are getting familiar with each other's stuff. So it's now no longer, depending on the scouting reports. Now you've seen it. You know what's coming. So I'm curious to see what adjustments Buehler makes. And again, we've been saying this almost every game. We need length out of our starters. If Buehler goes 4, or if Buehler his pitch count starts getting high in the second or the third innings, it's asking a lot to tax your bullpen for 3 games, And it's just like, yes, the bullpen stepped up tonight, but it's asking a lot to have them step up again tomorrow night. But that is unfortunately the situation that the Dodgers find themselves in. But I'm hoping Buehler comes up big, but I am very nervous because it's just we haven't seen it consistently all year.
And for those of you joining us on any of the platforms you're watching us, thank you for joining us on the After the Game show here at Dodgers Beat. If you any questions that you want us to field, by all means, throw them our way. Any comments, we'll time them in, and we appreciate all the support and you guys joining us. And I agree with you. The thing that I'm the most worried about, and I think is going to be the key to the game as far as the pitching goes, is Walker's pitch count. I suspect that it's going to be 5 and 75 or 6 and 95 is probably what they're going to say with Walker, in part because of the blister. And also because if they advance after these next 2 games, they still have to be able to have, they don't want him to be gassed. So it's going to be interesting to see how they use him tomorrow and who they go to as well right out the gate from the bullpen. Obviously tonight, we saw how that kind of went when they decided to go with Joe Kelly right after Dustin May. And Joe Kelly, all in all, it may have not been the greatest outing, if you will, but fantastic job. And obviously, when you have that defense behind you, he was able to control it a little bit. And obviously, Mcgee making that outstanding play. I mean, it's one of those things where they were kind of, they bank on that defense with the guy like Joe Kelly, who doesn't necessarily have the best control in the world. But like you said, Blake Trinan, who also got the win tonight, Blake went out and I think had a bit of a redemption outing, if you will. Because he'd been struggling with that control, and he found it. Whatever he'd been working on for the last couple of days was outstanding. And for me, you could almost say that was another momentum shift because those guys also saw what Blake was doing, and it kind of was like, okay, we can do this. Because again, then we had Baez come in, and that changeup was out of this world. And so that's the Baez that we need to see going into tomorrow. Because I mean, obviously tomorrow, all hands on deck again, aside from Gonsolin, I would suspect, and Kershaw maybe. But I mean, all in all, though, this was the game that the Dodgers have been trying to kind of get together, in my opinion, this entire series. And with Dave saying before today's game that these guys hadn't stuck to the plan, this was the plan. And again, for me, these 7 innings where they're able to kind of get it going and stick to that plan was key, in my opinion, to get it going into tomorrow, because obviously you can be fired up. But if you're not going out there and executing like the Dodgers were not, because they were swinging at really bad pitches. Bellinger and that strikeout in the first go around, that was a ball. And we said it in our text, like they know what to kind of throw at them, and especially when you're trying to force something, those are the sorts of mistakes that the Dodgers are going to make. And I think now they're like, okay, this is the plan. This is what they've been talking about for however long now since the series started. Now we're here. For you, aside from Walker going out and doing the thing tomorrow, what do you think is going to be the key to the game to kind of get the same result to force a game 7?
Look, we need our big stars to show up. And the big stars are our everyday players that are in the lineup. The Braves superstars have shown up in this series. Freddie Freeman is killing us. And there's got to be a way that we can avoid pitching him. The perfect microcosm, I think, for me in this series took place in the second inning with the Braves. Dansby stole second. Well, he didn't steal it. He took off for second, and then Markakis did a beautiful job of hitting it to the left side. And they went to third, and it was just that level of aggression that I was like, why aren't the Dodgers doing that? Why don't I see the Dodgers doing that, right? So Mookie has, had his moments today, right? Corey Seager and Justin Turner are the ones that are consistently giving us professional at-bats. Corey Seager is red hot, and he is carrying us, right? So you hope that he can keep that way. Right now, obviously, the one that I'm talking about is Cody Bellinger. I know he was your pick to click for the series. We need Cody Bellinger to show up. It is so frustrating to see that it is now, I think, 4 years that he has struck out on that same pitch where they bust him inside. I know that the guys at Fox did a breakdown of his batting stance. I don't know if you saw that with A-Rod and Big Papi, and that they feel that he's standing too close to the plate. Look, I've never played Major League Baseball. I'm not going to sit here and tell Cody Bellinger how to hit. But the one thing I can say is if I, a fan, can see that they're throwing the same pitch to you and you have not made any adjustments to that, or you're still falling for it, then I don't know how you can be in the conversation with Mike Trout as being the best baseball player in Major League Baseball. Bellinger needs to step up. The stars need to show up. They have to match the Braves' energy because those guys, Ozuna, Freeman and Ozuna, are killing us. And we need something to counter that.
Well, and again, I also do not play Major League Baseball, but I do happen to agree with A-Rod and Big Papi that Belly is not adjusting. That's a better way of putting it. If and they have all the analytics in the world in the Los Angeles organization where they're definitely telling him what adjustments he needs to make. And I think a huge part of it is I think going into it, like I said, those first couple of innings, I think they were all trying to force something. They were trying to make that moment happen to kind of get something going. And I think that's a huge problem with why Bellinger is kind of, in a sense, forcing that awkward, trying to just hit whatever. He's just trying to get something going at this point. And I hope, that tonight's win, in my opinion, like I said, it's kind of a complete win, if you will, even though the first couple of innings were sketchy. I think it's going to maybe reinvigorate those guys to remind them, like, okay, this is how we go out there and win. It's not necessarily just relying on the long ball. Granted, the majority of we're here because of the long ball, right? But that's what all of them, it seems like, especially Cody, is trying to do. He's trying to go out there and hit a ball out of Globe Life every single time. And obviously you have to appreciate the aggressiveness, but a huge part of it is what Freddie Freeman is doing, hitting the ball through the shift.
Yeah.
Because again, Freddie isn't trying to go out there and crush the ball. And when you look at Freddie's stats as far as like his charting goes, where he struggles, if you will, I don't even want to say struggle. I feel like that's insulting the man. Like where he definitely just tries to reach to get a ball is in the upper half, and he's left-handed, so that's going away, right? So I mean, that's where I think is going to be key tomorrow, is maybe going away, but just not leaving anything to hang. And that's where it's a little dangerous for a guy like Walker Buehler, because if you go away from a guy like that, and especially with the blister issue that he's been having, obviously he still throws the curveball, but he's not throwing it as much. He still throws a slider, doesn't throw it as much. So it's one of those things where it's like if he's going to go away, it needs to have some sort of movement on him to not let Freddie get to it, so that way he can turn the barrel and get it to go the other way. Because tonight, perfect example towards the end of the game there, I forgot what inning it was. I think it was in the seventh. He hit that ball right through the shift. And I mean, that's just a clinician as far as Freddie Freeman goes, because he's such a big dude, but he has such a compact swing. It's preposterous. But I mean, again, this is why he is the NL MVP. And I know that's hyperbole because it hasn't been announced yet. But I mean, again, it's like the Corey Seager thing. Freddie Freeman is the best first baseman in my opinion, the damage from that. Because Osuna, John Boy, all credit in the world to @John Boy. If you don't follow them, I highly suggest them because they are hilarious. He did a breakdown, and Ozuna crushes 3-2 counts, crushes them. Tonight was proof of that. They crushed it, and that's been the caveat that Dodgers pitching has had is they've been getting high in the counts. And I think that's going to be the other key for tomorrow, aside from the pitch count, because Dustin May is fully proving that point. He had, I think, 53 pitches, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And I mean, for 2 innings of work, that's a lot of pitches. So, you know, it's one of those things where the other indicator is not getting those counts and not letting those guys get you into full counts. Because if there's any evidence of that, look what Will Smith did tonight. He went from 0-2, got it to a full count, goes down and gets a bomb. So, I mean, it's a matter of you have to be efficient with your pitching, which is obviously easier said than done. And we don't run into that issue. But, I mean, to your point, if they're going to be able to contain Freddie, it's either pitch around him or don't pitch to him at all. And I don't think the Dodgers are not going to pitch to him at all just because they don't want to give them a guy on base either. So you're obviously a fine line because those other guys around him are killing us, right? So for me, I mean, obviously it's going to be important to try to maintain Freddie's efficiency, if you will, to not get there. But tomorrow, for sure, the defense is going to have to come up big. You know, any way that they can minimize damage, you know, because again, tonight is to an example that you gave earlier, Will Smith saving, you know, obviously there was the pass ball, right? That could have been bad. That could have been disastrous. And it's those little defensive errors that kind of get you where you are. Chris Taylor, even though he got a little banged up on that ball that he threw towards second to JT and Freddie Freeman slid, if it bounced, right, and it wasn't that far off, but I mean, if that is a not an accurate of a throw, who knows what happens there too? Freddie has speed too. He's a big dude that can run too. So I mean, it's the defense is going to have to come up big tomorrow as well as the offense. It's going to have to be another complete game. And as we kind of swing into tomorrow as well, Max Fried, who had an outstanding outing the last time that the Dodgers faced them, which, you know, I hope, like you've said a couple times for the last couple of days, the Dodgers have to have a short memory. How do you think the Dodgers are going to approach Max after what we saw tonight?
I hope they take the approach that look. I think when the Braves kill us is when they don't chase, like they force the Dodgers to throw strikes. And the problem is when we're getting too much of the middle of the plate. Like Ozuna has been feasting on the fact that the Dodgers have just been leaving stuff right over the middle, right? So I think for Fried, they have to stop chasing. But also, you're probably only going to get one good pitch in the whole at-bat from Fried. So don't take that good pitch. You know, if it's all about... Hopefully they pick him up. Now this is the second time around. They know what to expect, so they'll be able to pick up the ball on him. But that's the thing, is sometimes they end up looking at a pitch right down the middle. I mean, I usually don't have to worry about that with Corey Seager because Corey Seager's up there hacking, right? But anybody else, it's just I feel like they take a pitch right down the middle just because they want to see pitches. Well, guess what? That's the best pitch you're going to see in the whole at-bat. And now you're going to hit a pitch that Max Fried wants you to hit. So I hope in terms of the aggressiveness is not just go out there and be free swingers, but go out there and hit strikes. If the guy is throwing you a strike, it doesn't mean that you have to take pitches to see what he's got. You already saw him. So it's that aggressiveness that I hope they see. It was an aggressiveness that happened in the second half of this game, you know, because at first, you know, it was really shaky and it was really nervous that I was just like, really, this is how we're going to go out? We're going to go out like this? We're going to go out in 5 games?
Well, and someone posed the question, isn't pitching around a guy and not pitching to him the same thing? No. So when you pitch around a guy, you're essentially banking on them chasing. And that's going to, potentially enhance them striking out or hitting a ball that ends up being a pop fly, something like that, right? Obviously, if you just go, hey, we're just going to go 4 and walk them, then that's that, right? But what you're trying to do is you're throwing, either getting them super uncomfortable in the plate by as they would say, throwing inside, and or throwing away and trying to get them to swing. They're 2 different things, and that's why a guy like Joe Kelly is actually a guy that they brought in, because that's kind of his specialty. He tries to make you uncomfortable in the box by making you make those mistakes. So that's why, against a guy like Freddie Freeman, it's difficult to do because he's such a professional hitter and he's such a clinician and he has such a compact swing. It's the equivalent of choking up like almost to the middle of your bat. But this dude has such a compact swing that he doesn't make a lot of mistakes. So it's a matter of making him essentially make a mistake, forcing him to do that. And that's something the Dodgers haven't done this series. They haven't been able to do that. So I'm hoping that tomorrow, and potentially as if they are able to force a Game 7, the caveat is that they make Freeman uncomfortable in the box. Easier said than done, of course, because that dude is a professional hitter. That dude can hit, he can rake, and it's difficult to do. So, and again, he showed it tonight. These 2 teams shift quite a bit, and they both, they have guys that can hit into the shift, and Freddie did it again tonight. He went oppo on him and hit right through the gap. And it's one of those things where, again, it's easier said than done. But that lineup itself, that top half of that lineup, is if you make a mistake, they're unforgiving. So that's the other caveat to that is okay, like if you want to make us, force us to make mistakes, that's fine, but we're going to make you pay for it, whether it's Ozuna, whether it's d'Arnaud, whether it's Austin Riley. That's the other caveat to all of that. So that's why that chess game, if you will, is going to be important tomorrow, because the Dodgers, I think, are also going to be, kind of playing like they're backed into a corner, obviously, because it's an elimination game, but they also can't make mistakes. If they make those mistakes tomorrow, it's not going to be the same outcome as today. But, and to the point of all of that is I think Mookie Betts had felt uncomfortable, and I think they were making Mookie make those mistakes and swinging at bad pitches. In the first inning, he swung at that pitch and flew out right away. And I think it was one of those where, again, it felt like it was forced to get something going. And after that, he kind of calmed him down, and he was able to, to go out there and get those 2 hits tonight, which were huge. And now we're here. We're talking Game 6, which I legitimately also thought after those first couple innings, is this really how we're going to go out? Heads hung low, and not playing their game as far as what they're doing, right? So it all around a great win, an absolutely great win. And Will Smith, again, he's showing why there's all the hype around him and why there has been hype around him. And tonight, just going out there and doing the thing. And Corey Seager, reminding everyone, this is what a healthy Corey Seager can do. Because we have to remember, Corey Seager had 2 pretty major surgeries. He had that Tommy John surgery and the hip surgery that was, for his torn labrum on his hip. Those aren't easy surgeries to come back from, because this is, I think he said, before summer camp, that this was the first time in a few years that he could actually focus on getting ready for the season and not rehabbing. Right. And that's huge. And he's, he had an outstanding regular season. He's had a huge postseason. And like you said, he's carrying this team. Obviously, tomorrow we know what to expect as far as from Corey goes, and we've talked about Cody Bellinger. Who else do you think needs to step up huge tomorrow? And I know that's a loaded question, but a part of it is like you said, to your point, they threw everything in the kitchen sink at them, and it's a matter of they have to do it again for at least the next 2 days if they want to advance.
Well, yeah, look, it's the offense. It's going to be a whole team effort. But here's the thing. When we get into that bullpen tomorrow, we're probably not going to see the same guys that we saw today. We're probably going to see Dylan Floro. We're probably going to see Kolarek. Guys that haven't had much success in the series. So those guys who've had previous bad outings those guys are going to have to step up. Because, at this point, we're getting towards the end of the series. A lot of these guys are going to be, on fumes, and we're going to be burning them out. But one thing I want to talk about, and we briefly hinted at it because of the beginning of the game, the way the game started, and how they were just getting. You had mentioned that Minter had never pitched more than 2 innings, and here he is with 7 strikeouts, just mowing them down, mowing the Dodgers down. And that was the quotes that came out before the game. The one with Justin Turner, and then the one with Alex Wood. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Justin Turner said that the team is all fired up in some text group chat, and, that they were all fired up. And then Alex Wood made the comment that because the Dodgers have been in the playoffs so long, it's hard for them to get motivated. That's what I saw in the first 3 innings. And that, to me, was very troubling. Now, I think that both of those statements are true. And that makes me wonder what the hell is happening in that dugout. And that's why I think that Mookie play was so crucial, because it lit a fire under their ass. Now, why did it have to take that? I mean, I don't know. Because if these guys are that relaxed going into an elimination game, when guess what? You guys haven't done anything. You haven't won a World Series. It's 8 straight years in the playoffs, and you haven't won a World Series. So for you to act that you need to get motivated, you need something to get motivated, that was really disappointing to hear. So I'd love to I mean, we probably won't hear that. It'll probably won't come out until the end of the season. But I really would love to hear the dynamics of what was really said. What the hell is going on? How is it that you can have such 2 different opinions of an approach going into an elimination game?
No, and that's a fair, if true, of course. And like you said, we won't know until after the season. But if true, that's a fair question to ask, because I mean, you're going into an elimination game. It's do or die. And truthfully, I mean, now you're still in a do or die situation. And then obviously, if you win tomorrow, it's winner take all. And what sort of fire are you going to need lit under your ass then too? So I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how they go into tomorrow. And you know what? Thankfully, it's a short turnaround, because we're looking at a 1:38 start tomorrow. Yeah. So I think that's going to be a thing. Something that plays into the graces of the Dodgers, if you will. To kind of keep that momentum going with a short turnaround. And you know what? And who I'm looking to, if they do end up doing the thing where they're going to try to go to guys that didn't go tonight. A guy that I'm going to kind of say is a key to the bullpen, if you will, is Jake Mcgee. I think if Jake Mcgee can go out tomorrow and do what he's been doing, it's been a great story to see, with the struggles in Colorado documented. And if we're honest, there isn't a lot of pitchers that have a lot of success in Colorado just because of the legend of that, of course. But with Jake coming over and them making those subtle changes and him going out and hitting 95 again, having the movement on his stuff, he has the opportunity to go out there if they go to him and they just, they make the call to him to step up huge, kind of like how Blake Trinan did today, to be able to kind of link everything and get the flow going for the bullpen, because tonight was a huge game for the bullpen. That was a game for sure the bullpen needed. And if that bullpen, doesn't see that they needed that, then that's another issue too, kind of like how relaxed the dugout is. That's one thing that I've been worried about, is that the bullpen, although been scrutinized and rightfully so, for the last week or so, we're going into tomorrow. If they can carry it, if Jake Mcgee can get that done, that's going to be huge for the Dodgers. It's going to be huge for Jake, but most importantly, it's going to be huge going into Game 7. Because if you're able to get a guy like Mcgee going, if you're able to get a guy like Floro going and Kolarek, who both those guys up until this series for the most part have been pretty lights out. I'm still waiting for the real Adam Kolarek to please stand up. Because that dude had a preposterous regular season, and then obviously they optioned him, towards the end, because they're getting clever with the moves and whatnot and giving him rest. But I think that's the unfortunate thing with happening in the wild card series and in the NLDS. It may be possible that they may have given some of those guys too much rest, and obviously leaving Floro off that roster, that might have been one of those things too, where it's like, hey, like, we know what we need, and this is right now you don't fit this because these are short series, and I get that, but now that might have kind of came back and bit them in the ass a little bit, because now you're seeing the issues with Floro having that time off maybe affecting him. Obviously, the situation is a big situation, because now, we're here in a game 6 and now we're talking the if necessary games, and if you're doing that when you're behind the 8 ball, then that obviously changes the mentality. But it is interesting to see, though, that Dodgers dugout is so lax, if you will, and that they have to find some sort of motivation to kind of get it going again. And that's assuming that reporting is true. Obviously, we don't know, and to your point, we won't know until after the season. And for the sake of this team, I hope that's not the case. Because in that the optics of that aren't going to be great either. Because of the guys that you have on that bench, and obviously the guys that you have in that dugout. But looking ahead to tomorrow, obviously Walker Buehler is going to be the key to the game. Like tonight, just as an example, like as we talk pitch counts, Dustin May threw 55 pitches, and 32 of them were for strikes. That's not a terrible ratio. Again, it's just that scoreline is a little bit deceiving because of everything that happened. But the key to that was him getting high into the counts, and that's why Walker cannot do that tomorrow. And again, Kenley tonight on 12 pitches had 10 of them were for strikes. That's the ratio that you want to see for Kenley. And I think, if I'm honest with you, I wouldn't be surprised if we see Kenley tomorrow, just because if he went out and had that clean of an inning tonight, and I wouldn't even call that garbage time either, if I'm honest with you, just because the Braves very easily can get something going pretty quickly. So as far as that goes, I'm not worried about that. But when you look at tomorrow offensively, obviously we know that we're going to have Corey there. We're going to have Mookie, hopefully, riding that hot hand. And you've talked about Cody. Who else do you think needs to have a huge game tomorrow that's been kind of lax, if you will, for the last couple of nights?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily lax. I think we need playoff Jock to have a playoff Jock moment. Obviously, look, I think, we spent a lot of time talking about the bullpen. We spent a lot of time talking about the starters. This series has not gone the way I thought it was going to go. All right. We talked a lot about these starters and this bullpen. The offense obviously has dominated this series. In the games that the Braves have won, they've scored 5, they've scored 8, they've scored 10 runs, right? And the games that the Dodgers have won, they've scored 15 runs and they've scored 7. So obviously the key to this series is you're going to have to outscore that's a total Tim McCarver. I apologize for using that Tim McCarver knowledge there on you, but it just seems like you're going to have to score a lot of runs in order to win this game, because I don't know if these offenses are just that good or the pitching is that bad in this series. I don't know what's happening here, but I think you're going to need to I think Jock is going to have to step up, and I think the injury to Taylor is going to be interesting, because I don't know if they're going to throw them out there, which means, are we going to see Pollock out in left field? And that's what concerns me. You saw the throw that Taylor made. I mean, we all know he's our best defensive left fielder. Sometimes, especially seeing Pollock and some of the routes that he takes the balls out in left field, and Jock doesn't seem to be the same outfielder that he was maybe at the beginning of his career. I am a little worried about those guys, but in terms of the guys that we haven't talked about, I feel like Pollock has had a little bit of bad luck in this series. I feel like he's had some at-bats where he's made some good contact and has nothing to show for it. So I would love to see Pollock and Jock come through.
Well, and a thing that's going to be important to see is Max Fried in his first start against these Dodgers had 9 strikeouts. That number obviously can't be 9. It has to be significantly less if they want to have a chance to get anything going. Even if they don't get a couple more than a couple of runs off of him, as we saw tonight, that's all you need to get something going. If you can get a couple runs, if you can keep that strikeout number down to maybe 3-4 strikeouts, and then kind of force him deep into the counts, that's going to be important. And I think the guy that's going to be the catalyst for that they need to have a huge day from tomorrow is Justin Turner. If Justin Turner can come out and if there's anyone that can put a clinic on just as well as Freddie Freeman when it comes to at bats, it's Justin Turner. And that's going to be the key for getting Max Fried out of there early, because as we saw tonight, that bullpen after their opener, they're not invincible. They can get to them. And it's just a matter of being able to get to them. And that's the Dodger MO. You have to knock that starter out to be able to get them going. And I think that's going to be huge for tomorrow, being able, to if they can get them knocked out after, 3 or 4 innings, keep that strikeout number low. And then again, giving Walker run support, because Walker on 100 pitches in that last outing, it wasn't the best of Walker outings. Like you said, we haven't seen the best of Walker Buehler this year. But at this point, you just need a quality start. And I think, the key for him is going deep and being efficient with his pitches. And if he can go, 100 pitches, 6 innings even, I think everyone will take that, just because that means he's keeping them in the game, kind of like how Clayton was last night. They just can't make that mistake of either keeping him in for one hitter too long, or, the mistake of throwing to the wrong guy and making those mistakes, because again, Marcell Ozuna was 90 feet away from potentially changing the game as far as the momentum was going. Did he have a mental lapse? Absolutely. But if Mookie doesn't make that play, I honestly think that we're talking about a completely different outcome of tonight's game. And I think Justin Turner is going to be that guy that I think everyone should look out for as far as getting everything going. If you were to call if you were to make a prediction, if you will, I know you're not huge on that, but what would your prediction for tomorrow be?
Well, I have the Dodgers in 7, so I think you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
The Dodgers are winning tomorrow. And we talked about this last night, where I said, total typical Dodger thing to do, right? Win game 5, win game 6, and then break our hearts in game 7. But, I mean, going back to that Walker Buehler, if he can keep the game close, and I think another key is we need to avoid what I like to refer to as the Darren Dreifert inning, where Darren Dreifert would be dominant for 4 innings, and then in the 5th inning gave up 6 runs. And I feel like that's kind of what's happened to the Dodgers in this series, is the games have been close, and then they just have that one inning where they let things get out of hand. If Buehler can keep this game close and keep it in it, we've seen what's happened. The Dodgers can get to that Braves bullpen, and especially now we're seeing them again. And then this was a game they needed to take advantage of. They should have taken advantage of the game last game, game 4, and then they'd be really in the catbird seat. But I'm feeling good about it. They just have to avoid those mental mistakes and limit it, and just be tough.
No, and as you know, I had predicted that this series would be over in 6, and here we are going into game 6 with the Dodgers needing the, if necessary, game 7. But I'm actually predicting a close game tomorrow. I think it's going to be a nail biter, and I think the Dodgers win. And I think the key component is going to be Walker keeping them in the game, and then I think that bullpen's going to come up huge and kind of continue that redemption tour, if you will, going into game 7. Where, again, anything could happen in a game 7. As we saw today in the ALCS, the Astros have come down, reminding everyone of the 2004 Red Sox getting back to where we are now. And anything is possible in this crazy game. And I think the Dodgers pull it out tomorrow and force that game 7. And it's going to be interesting to see how the Dodgers kind of deal with, as we talked about, with the reports of that group text saying that they, because they've been here so much, that they need a little bit of motivation. I think they have that motivation now. It's just a matter of them turning it into something. And again, we don't know how corroborated, if you will, those reports are, but if they are in fact true, here's the motivation that they need. It's being given to them on a platter. But again, I think the Dodgers keep it close, and I think I think your 7-game prediction is going to come to fruition. But it's one game at a time, or as the great Tommy Lasorda has always said, 1 inning at a time. Yeah. Because that's what's going to be important tomorrow. Is they're going to have to go out there and take advantage of each inning and not make mistakes. I mean, that's going to be key tomorrow as well, is obviously they have to execute, but the main thing is they have to stick with the plan and not make mistakes, because if you give these Braves any little bit of wiggle room, as we saw last night, they dropped a 10 spot.
Yeah, you know what I find interesting, going back to the Alex Wood comment, I almost feel like that's the same sentiment that Dodger fan was feeling going into this game. I don't know if you, a lot of the people that were Dodger fans that I interacted with before today's game, there was one person that said they weren't going to watch tonight's game because they just didn't want to get put through it. I saw people were texting me halfway through the game before, of course, the tables were turned, saying, you know what, they're so over this. Like, they just don't care. And that's what I worry about, right? This is why this town has become a Laker town. Now, mind you, a lot of Laker fans are Dodger fans and vice versa. It's the same fan. But baseball is my favorite sport. I always look at LA as a Dodger town. But the reality is it's a Laker town. And why is it a Laker town? Because the Lakers win. You know, it's been 10 years before the Lakers had won a championship, and they ended up winning it. So you have a lot of people, a lot of young people that have actually seen their team win. And that relates to interest. If you keep showing up to the dance and you don't win it, you're going to get that apathy. You're going to get, I finally understand now why those Atlanta Braves teams in the 90s had hard times selling playoff tickets, right? Because if you keep seeing your team, you give up. You don't want to deal. You don't want to be. You don't want to. I don't like the way they make me feel and stuff like that. So I'm just curious if you heard a lot of the Dodger fans just throw in the towel and just be like, I'm so over this losing.
No, and I mean, here, I'll be honest with you. I mean, I'll even show you right now. You've seen these. I mean, I'm just as much of a Laker fan as I am a Dodger fan. And, the only caveat is, I never worked in the NBA, but I worked in Major League Baseball. And, obviously the dynamics of the two are totally different, right? But at the end of the day, LA is a Laker town because, like you said, they're winning. And, I think slowly, the Mookie Betts effect that's the other part of having Mookie Betts there is that's going to help. But the crazy thing about LA too is the stars. All, everyone that's there. Anthony Rendon said it best. He didn't want to live that Hollywood lifestyle.
Right.
But you have Cody Bellinger, you have Mookie Betts, you have Corey Seager. Those are, if they're anywhere else, obviously they're superstars now. But if, for the most part, if they were anywhere else, they'd be the one guy on a team. So it's LA's that weird conundrum though, where it's gonna always be a Lakers town for sure. I mean, in my lifetime, they've won 12 titles. The Dodgers have won one in my lifetime. So, that's the mentality that comes with it. But I think that slowly the tide is going to turn, but the pain is real. Like we talked about it last night off air, like, oh my God, like what, like I can't do this anymore. Like what, like when, you talk about like how the Cubs and the Red Sox had some fans that they were just, they look back on it and they're like, hey, I wish my grandpa would have held out for another year to be able to see them, see the Cubs win. The White Sox, those sorts of fan bases that are just as rabid and just as proud, but it turns into this. And obviously, if they bow out tomorrow, which we all hope they don't, we both have our speeches, if you will, that are put away, that are ready to go. I mean, it's and obviously I went in on Manny Machado, and I have no problem going in on the Dodgers as far as that goes, because the Alex Wood comment is one of those that, again, it's reported. Don't know how true it is, but if it is in fact true, that's unfortunate, because that's obviously the mentality that you don't need to be taking going into an elimination game, because the next two games, if there is a second game, are elimination games. And these are, they're going to be huge. But on that note, we survived. We made it through to another game. And in my opinion, the play of the year, that, the Cody Bellinger catch, against San Diego, the show pods, as you call them.
Yeah.
That's a close second. But the Mookie Betts play for me is the play of the year. That's showing, the importance of the fundamentals of baseball and how important it is to stick to that stuff to get to this point. Because if that play, in my opinion, doesn't happen, we're not talking victory tonight. That this is a completely different game. But on that note, we will see you tomorrow. We'll see you a little earlier than 11 o'clock. But we can all sleep a little easier tonight, and hopefully, and to your point too, I saw some comments on Twitter. I don't really, for those, I've been asked this like a couple times, why I don't really interact a whole lot on Twitter. I'm not the kind of guy that reads comments, if I'm honest with you, especially during a game, because some people's takes, I just I'm like what are we doing here? Like what's going on? But some people had said that they I'm not going to watch because I don't want to go through the pain. But other people were like, I'm not going to jinx, so I'm just not going to watch either. So, and to those of you that didn't watch tonight, do the same thing tomorrow. Don't watch. Don't turn on the TV. Don't even think about turning on your damn TV. Just go have yourself a nice socially distant hangout at the park since it's an early game. Maybe take your speaker with you and listen to it, but don't watch. Just whatever you do, don't watch. Whatever you can do. But we thank you again for joining us on the After the Game show here at Dodgers Beat. From myself, Juan, our producer, Roger, who you cannot see as he calls himself the voice in the sky. We thank you for joining us, and stay safe, wear your masks if you have to go outside, and we will see you tomorrow after the game.